The Operator Log, Episode 19, What We Observe. How to choose a market that actually works. Market selection is not about identifying opportunity, it is about identifying certainty. 3 episodes have built toward this one. Episode 17 established what disqualifies a market, systemic resistance in its 3 structural forms. Episode 18 gave the diagnostic metric in full, the human-to-logic ratio, how to calculate it, what confirms it. This episode assembles both into the complete method Arco actually applies before committing capital to a market, operational selection. Most businesses fail before they begin, not because of poor execution or a lack of talent, but because of poor market selection. Most founders treat market selection as a creative exercise. They search for novel ideas or emerging trends that have not yet been exploited. At Arco, we treat that approach as the primary source of unnecessary risk. Market selection is not about identifying opportunity. It is about identifying certainty. Operational selection is the systematic process of identifying proven markets with high coordination overhead and reconstructing their value delivery loops as autonomous systems to capture the structural margin embedded in the incumbent cost base. It replaces the iterative uncertainty of searching for a market that validates a product with the structural certainty of a market that has been running, and running badly, for years. This is the operator log. The search for novelty is the primary source of risk in venture building. This is counterintuitive to most founders, who are trained to believe that novelty is where the value is. But consider what novelty actually costs in terms of what you can know before you build. The more novel an idea is, the less predictable the unit economics become. In a market that does not yet exist, there is no historical data on acquisition cost, churn rate, or lifetime value. Every projection in the business case is a guess dressed as a model. The error bars are the width of the uncertainty about whether the market will develop at all, not the width of execution risk, which is at least partially within the founder's control, but the width of a variable no one controls, whether customers will behave the way the model assumes they will. Arco removes this guesswork by selecting markets with deep historical data. We know exactly what a customer in commercial insurance or back-office compliance is willing to pay. We know their pain points because they have been the same for 20 years. By selecting a proven market rather than a novel one, we shift the central question from whether customers will buy to whether we can build the system that delivers it at a structurally lower cost. That is a question we can answer with precision before a single line of code is written, because the demand side of the equation is already resolved by 20 years of transaction history, and the supply side is an engineering problem with a known target. This is why Arco does not claim to disrupt. We are not here to change what people buy. We are here to change how what they already buy is produced. The customer receives the same service they have always purchased. The cost structure is not improved. It is replaced. The distinction between improving a cost structure and replacing it is not semantic. Improving implies the existing architecture is retained and made marginally more efficient, the model we examined across episodes 6 and 14, where agents are layered onto human workflows and the coordination tax persists in a slightly reduced form. Replacing means the architecture itself is different. The revenue loop that generated the transaction for 20 years under the incumbent's model generates the same transaction under Arco's model, but the coordination that used to consume 20 to 30% of the operating budget has been removed entirely, not trimmed. Novelty seeking and structural reconstruction are not two versions of the same strategy. They manage entirely different categories of risk. The novelty-seeking founder is betting that a market will exist. The structural reconstructor is betting that an existing market can be delivered more efficiently. The second bet is testable before capital is committed. The first is not. Operational selection applies 3 structural criteria in combination: not sequentially in the sense that passing one qualifies a market. All three must converge simultaneously. A market that satisfies two of the three is not a partial opportunity. It is a disqualified one. The first criterion is proven demand. The market must have a track record of consistent, non-discretionary revenue. We look for services that businesses or individuals must purchase to remain compliant, operational, or competitive. If a market requires a customer education or behavioral change to exist, if the sales process involves convincing the customer they need something they do not currently buy, we ignore it. We prefer markets that are stable, predictable, and highly inefficient. Industries where the customer already buys the service and will continue buying it regardless of who provides it. The second criterion is a structurally high human-to-logic ratio. We developed this metric in full in episode 18, how it is calculated, what confirms it structurally, what target outcome it produces. Arco's primary filter, established first in episode 5, is markets where human labor accounts for more than 60% of gross margin. When the ratio approaches 1 human hour of effort for every unit of output, the incumbent is operating an architecture that code could own. That gap is Arco's entry point. The third criterion is that the inefficiency must be structural across the entire sector, not idiosyncratic to individual firms. We look for a high coordination tax distributed uniformly across all incumbents. When the market leaders all share the same high-cost, human-heavy delivery model, no single player has achieved an architectural advantage. The best managed company in the sector is still vulnerable to a competitor whose architecture does not carry the same overhead. This is fragmented competition in its precise operational expression, not a market where everyone is competing, but a market where no one has yet won. All three criteria must be present simultaneously, and the failure modes, when only some of them are met, are worth naming precisely, because each one is a different way to lose capital. Proven demand without structural inefficiency describes a mature market with no available arbitrage. The incumbents are already efficient, the margins are thin, and there is no coordination tax to capture. Structural inefficiency without a proven demand describes a speculative reconstruction. You may be right that a better architecture would work, but you cannot confirm anyone wants what you would deliver. High human-to-logic ratio in a market with systemic resistance, the condition we examined in full in episode 17, is a false positive, a market that looks breakable from the outside and fails the structural filter the moment you examine why the inefficiency exists. We only proceed when all three conditions converge in the same market at the same time. Once a market passes the three criteria, Arco maps its coordination surface to size exactly how much operational arbitrage is available before committing engineering capital. The coordination surface is the sum total of all human-to-human interactions required to deliver the product, every handoff, approval, status update, and manual intervention that exists between the initial trigger and the completed transaction. It is distinct from the coordination tax in a specific and useful way. The surface is the observable condition. The tax is the financial consequence that the condition imposes. You map the surface first, you count the handoffs, trace the approval chains, identify the manual interventions, and then you size the tax, what those interactions cost the business in the aggregate, expressed as a percentage of operating budget or gross margin. In a legacy logistics firm, the coordination surface spans brokers, carriers, drivers, and dispatchers, each interaction a point of failure and a source of cost. Every phone call confirming a pickup window, every email updating a delivery status, every manual reconciliation between a carrier's invoice and the broker's expected rate is overhead that the incumbent treats as the cost of doing business. Arco treats it as the cost of poor architectural design. The size of the coordination surface is a direct proxy for the available operational arbitrage. The larger the surface, the greater the margin, between what the incumbent charges and what an autonomous competitor needs to charge to generate the same return. By rebuilding the market as an agentic system, Arco does not reduce the coordination surface. It removes it entirely. The coordinators are replaced by state machines and deterministic logic. The machine-readable interfaces we established in episode 9 prevent the end of failures that used to require a human to resolve. The revenue loop remains the same. The customer buys the same service at the same frequency for a comparable price. The cost structure underneath it does not survive the transition. The business shifts from a service operation where margin is consumed by the coordination required to deliver the output to a system asset where the margin that was previously absorbed by coordination becomes structural profit. This is the connection back to episode 18's fragmentation argument, made complete. A fragmented market with a large, uniform coordination surface across every incumbent is not evidence of saturation. It is evidence that the operational arbitrage has never been captured, that no player in the market has replaced the surface with logic, only managed it more or less smoothly than their competitors. Arco is not entering to outmanage the coordination. Arco is entering to remove the need for it. Two further terms complete the operational selection method, both introduced formally here. Market determinism is the condition in which a market's revenue loop can be fully mapped as a deterministic sequence, the precondition for building an autonomous system into it at all. Full system design is the architectural commitment that follows from market determinism, building the entire revenue loop as a single coherent agentic system rather than automating individual steps within a human-coordinated whole. Both terms describe the same discipline from different angles. The market must be deterministic enough to model, and the build must be designed as a complete system rather than a patchwork of point solutions. What is operational selection, and how does Arco choose which markets to enter? Operational selection is Arco's structured method for identifying proven markets with high coordination overhead and reconstructing their value delivery loops as autonomous systems. It replaces speculative market discovery with structural market analysis. Three criteria must all converge: proven, non-discretionary demand with a historical track record, a structurally high human-to-logic ratio, specifically markets where human labor accounts for more than 60% of gross margin, and a coordination tax distributed uniformly across all incumbents, confirming the inefficiency is architectural rather than idiosyncratic to one firm. When all three converge, the market is a breakable market. Arco then maps the coordination surface, the sum of all human-to-human interactions required to deliver the service, to size the available operational arbitrage before committing to a build. Here is the verdict on market selection. Markets are not discovered. They are selected. The belief that the right market must be stumbled upon, found through inspiration, luck, or a founder's unique insight is a product of an era when the primary competitive variable was product innovation and operations were an afterthought. In the current economy, the winner is the operator who can deliver the same result as the incumbent at a structurally lower cost. That advantage does not come from a better product. It comes from a better architecture applied to a market that was already running and already broken. We prioritize markets where the human-to-logic ratio is at its most lopsided, and the coordination tax has compounded to the point where incumbents are no longer competing on the quality of their output, only on their capacity to manage their own internal complexity. That is the signal. We identify the logic, reconstruct the system, and operate the result. The 10-to-1 revenue-to-head count advantage we target is not a productivity metric imposed on a human workforce. It is the arithmetical consequence of entering a breakable market and removing its coordination surface. The full written version of this argument is memo number 19, How to Choose a Market That Actually Works, on the blog at arcoventure.studio. operational selection, coordination surface, market determinism, and full system design are all defined precisely in the Arco lexicon at arcoventure.studio/lexicon. Next week, what makes a market certain enough to build into, the final test Arco applies before capital commits, and what happens when a market passes every criterion except one. Technology changes what is possible. Selection determines what is profitable. This has been episode 19 of the Operator Log.